The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They built telescopes. They sent rockets. They dreamed of meeting other beings among the stars. In the year 2147, humanity finally answered that call. The first faster-than-light ship, the Horizon, broke through the barriers of physics and emerged in a distant star system. What the crew found changed everything. They were not alone. They had never been alone. The galaxy was full of life. Thousands of species had built civilizations across millions of worlds. They had cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. They had stations that orbited black holes. They had empires that stretched across entire arms of the Milky Way. And they had been watching Earth for a very long time. The Galactic Concord sent its representatives to meet humanity within days of the Horizon's arrival. The Concord was old. It had existed for 50,000 years, guiding the development of younger species and maintaining peace among the stars. 4,000 different species called themselves members. They had rules. They had traditions. They had ways of doing things that had worked for longer than human civilization had existed. The aliens who came to Earth were polite. They were welcoming. They spoke of friendship and cooperation and mutual benefit. But Admiral, who was just a young officer at the time, noticed something in their eyes, something that looked very much like fear. The Concord had studied humanity. They had watched Earth's history unfold through long-range sensors and hidden probes. They had seen the wars. They had seen the weapons. They had seen how quickly humans went from stone tools to nuclear bombs. What took other species 100,000 years, humans had done in 10,000. This terrified them. The Concord offered humanity membership, but there were conditions. They called it developmental oversight. Humans would limit the size of their warships. They would stop certain kinds of weapons research. They would allow Concord observers to monitor their military activities. In exchange, humanity would gain access to galactic trade, alien technologies, and the protection of the Concord's laws. Earth's leaders discussed the offer for months. Some wanted to refuse. They saw it as an insult, a leash put on a dog that might bite. Others saw it as wisdom. Humanity was new to the galaxy. They were surrounded by species with technologies far beyond their own. Starting a conflict would be foolish. In the end, they accepted. The Treaty of Saul was signed in 2149. Humanity became the member of the Galactic Concord. 200 years passed. Admiral was an old woman now. Her hair had turned white and her face carried the lines of a long life. But her eyes were still sharp and her mind was still quick. She stood on the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital station, looking down at the blue and green planet below. So much had changed. Human colonies now existed on dozens of worlds. Human ships carried goods between star systems. Human doctors worked in alien hospitals, and human engineers helped build structures on planets their grandparents had never heard of. Humanity had become respected members of galactic society. But knew the truth. She knew what lay beneath the surface. "Admiral," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain, her aide, approaching with a tablet in his hand. The monthly report from Project Prometheus. Took the tablet and looked at the data. Hidden in dead systems, far from Concord sensors, humanity had been busy. Shipyards that officially did not exist were building vessels that officially could not be built. Research stations that appeared on no map were developing weapons that the Concord had banned before humans learned to make fire. It was not that humanity planned to attack anyone. It was simply that they refused to be helpless. The galaxy was dangerous. The Concord's rules offered protection, but protection could fail. And if that day ever came, humanity intended to be ready. "The new dreadnought designs are ahead of schedule," reported. "We should have the first 3 completed within the year." Nodded slowly. "Good, and the training facilities?" "Fully operational. We have 50,000 soldiers training in combat methods the Concord thinks we forgot centuries ago. Handed the tablet back. She looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, other species went about their lives, thinking of humans as clever but harmless, useful, tame. They had seen humanity at its best for 200 years. They had no idea what humanity was capable of at its worst. "Do you ever wonder if we're wrong?" asked quietly. "Building all of this in secret, preparing for a war that might never come." Was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "When I was young, I read about a time called the Cold War. Two human nations pointed enough weapons at each other to destroy the world many times over. People asked the same question then. Why build weapons you hope never to use? Why prepare for destruction?" She turned to face. "The answer is simple. We prepare not because we want war, but because we want peace. True peace comes from strength, not weakness. The Conquered thinks they have tamed us. They think their rules and restrictions have made us safe. But safety is an illusion. The only real safety is the ability to defend yourself." Nodded slowly. He had heard this philosophy before. All members of Project Prometheus understood it. They hoped they would never need to use what they were building, but they built it anyway. Far across the galaxy, in a region of space the Conquered called the Outer Reaches, something was stirring. The Dominion had been expanding for 6 centuries. They were a warrior species, tall and powerful, with scales like armor and teeth like knives. They had conquered over 200 worlds, enslaving or destroying any species that stood in their way. The Conquered had tried to stop them once, long ago. The war had lasted 50 years and cost millions of lives. In the end, both sides had agreed to a border. The Conquered would not interfere with and would not attack conquered space. But borders are just lines on a map, and they were hungry for more. High Warlord Rand stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at a holographic display of the galaxy. His claws tapped against the arm of his command chair as he studied the map. The Conquered was vast, but it was also soft. Most of its member species had not fought a real war in thousands of years. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to fight, to conquer. "Tell me about the humans," Rand said to his intelligence officer. The officer pulled up data on the display. Images of human worlds appeared, ships, soldiers, cities. "They are a young species, my lord, members of the Conquered for only 200 of their years. They have shown themselves to be clever and adaptable, good traders, skilled engineers. Their military is small and restricted by Conquered treaties." Rand studied the images and their history before they joined the Conquered. The officer hesitated. "Violent, my lord, very violent. They fought many wars among themselves, but that was long ago. The Conquered has domesticated them." Rand made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Domesticated? Yes, that is what the Conquered does. They take species with fire in their blood and teach them to be peaceful. They think this makes the galaxy safer, but it only makes it weaker." He pointed to a world on the edge of conquered space, a human colony called 4. It was an agricultural world far from Earth, with a population of 8 million. "This world," Rand said, "it is close to our border. It would make a good test." The officer looked uncertain. "My lord, attacking a conquered world would break the treaty. The Conquered might respond." Rand turned to face his officer. His eyes were cold and hard. "The Conquered will talk. They will send diplomats and make speeches. By the time they decide to act, we will have already won. That is the weakness of democracy. That is the weakness of peace." He turned back to the display. "Prepare the fleet. We move within the month." On Earth, life continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Ships came and went from the orbital stations. Most humans had never heard of the Dominion. It was far away, and the Conquered's borders had held for centuries. But some people were watching. Some people always watched. In a secure facility beneath the mountains of what was once called Switzerland, A group of analysts monitored thousands of data streams from across the galaxy. They tracked ship movements. They listened to communications. They looked for patterns that others might miss. Lieutenant Sarah was one of these analysts. She was young, barely 30, but she had a gift for seeing connections that others overlooked. She had been watching them for months. Something about their behavior worried her. "Admiral," she said into her communicator, "I think you need to see this." An hour later, Admiral stood beside, looking at the data she had compiled. Ship movements near the border, supply convoys heading to staging areas, increased communications between military commanders. "They're preparing for something," said. "The patterns match pre-invasion movements we've seen in historical records." "Study the data carefully. Do we know the target?" "Not with certainty, but based on their positioning," pulled up a map. A red circle appeared around a single world. 4. Felt her heart grow cold. 8 million people, families, children, farmers who had never held a weapon in their lives. "Have you reported this to the Concord?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral, they said they would. Look into it." His voice carried a note of frustration. "They don't believe they would break the treaty. They think I'm overreacting." Was silent for a long moment. She had dealt with the Concord for decades. She knew how they operated. They were not evil. They were not stupid. But they were slow. They believed in process and procedure. They thought that talking could solve any problem. Sometimes talking was not enough. "Increase monitoring of the border," ordered. "I want updates every hour. And send a message to the Prometheus command. Tell them to begin quiet preparations." Looked at her with wide eyes. "Admiral, are we?" "We are preparing for the worst," said quietly. "I hope I am wrong. I hope the Concord is right and they will not attack. But if they do, we will not be caught helpless." She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at. "You did good work, Lieutenant. Keep watching. And pray that what you're seeing is not what you think it is." Across the galaxy, on 4, life was peaceful. The colony had been established 150 years ago. It was a farming world, covered in vast fields of crops that helped feed dozens of other human colonies. The people there lived simple lives. They worked the land during the day and watched the stars at night. Maria Santos was a third-generation colonist. Her grandmother had been among the first settlers. Maria worked as a teacher in the colony's main city, educating children about Earth's history and humanity's place in the galaxy. She loved her world. She loved the open spaces and the clean air and the sense of community that came from building something together. She had no idea that her world had been marked for death. On the last day of peace, Maria stood in her classroom and talked to her students about the Galactic Concord. She told them about the different species humanity had met. She showed them pictures of alien worlds and alien cities. The children asked questions, curious and excited about the universe beyond their sky. "Teacher," one boy asked, "are there bad aliens? Aliens who want to hurt us?" Maria smiled gently. "The galaxy is very big and there are many different kinds of beings. Some are friendly and some are not. But that's why we have the Concord. They help keep everyone safe." The boy seemed satisfied with this answer. Maria moved on to the next topic. She did not know that in the dark spaces between stars, a fleet of warships was already moving toward her world. On Earth, Admiral received the final confirmation. The fleet had crossed the border. They were heading directly for 4. She immediately contacted the Concord Council. She demanded action. She pleaded for them to send ships to warn the colony to do something. The council promised to discuss the matter. Ended the communication and sat in silence. She thought about the 8 million people on 4. She thought about the children in the schools and the farmers in the fields. She thought about what was coming for them. And she thought about the ships hidden in dead systems, the weapons that waited in secret, the soldiers who trained for wars the Concord thought impossible. She had spent her entire career building something she hoped would never be used. Now she wondered if that hope had been foolish all along. Her communicator buzzed. It was a message from Project Prometheus Command, a single question. "What are your orders?" Looked out her window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet was closing in on innocent people. Somewhere out there, diplomats were still talking while lives hung in the balance. She typed her response slowly, carefully. "Wait, watch, be ready." It was not the order she wanted to give, but it was the only order she could give. Not yet. Not until the galaxy understood what was at stake. Not until everyone saw what the Concord's peace really meant. The waiting was the hardest part. In the halls of the Concord's great assembly, representatives from thousands of species debated the movement. Some called it a training exercise. Some called it a mistake. Some suggested sending a diplomatic mission to clarify intentions. Hien, a being who had led the Concord for 3 centuries, listened to the debates with patience. He was old and wise and had seen many crises come and go. The galaxy was vast, and conflicts arose constantly. The key was to remain calm, to talk, to find solutions that satisfied everyone. "We should not overreact," he said to the assembly. "They have maintained the treaty for 600 years. One fleet movement does not mean war. Let us send envoys. Let us discuss. Let us find peace." The assembly murmured in agreement. This was the Concord way. This had always been the Concord way. Far away, the fleet entered the system. They did not send envoys. They did not discuss. They did not look for peace. They simply opened fire. Maria Santos was walking home from school when the sky turned to fire. She looked up and saw streaks of light falling from the heavens. At first, she thought they were meteors. Then she saw the city center explode. She never saw what killed her. None of them did. The bombardment was efficient and thorough. Within 72 hours, every city on 4 was ash. Every farm was burning. Every man, woman, and child was dead. 8 million people, gone in 3 days. When the news reached Earth, Admiral sat alone in her office. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply sat and stared at the report, reading the numbers over and over again. 8 million dead, 8 million. And the Concord had done nothing. Her communicator buzzed. It was a message from the United Earth Council. They wanted to meet. They wanted to discuss the response. Stood slowly. She straightened her uniform. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw an old woman who had spent her life preparing for something terrible. That something had finally arrived. She walked to the door and paused. She thought about the choice that lay ahead. The choice between restraint and rage. The choice between what humanity had shown the galaxy and what humanity truly was. For 200 years, they had worn a mask. They had played the role of peaceful traders and gentle engineers. They had convinced the galaxy that they were tame. That mask was about to come off. And the galaxy would finally see what was underneath. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours, every human colony knew what had happened at 4. 8 million dead, an entire world destroyed, children burned in their schools, families turned to ash in their homes. The oldest human settlement outside the Sol system, wiped from existence in 3 days. On Earth, people gathered in the streets. They watched the news on massive screens in city squares. They saw the images of the burning world. They saw the ships in orbit, firing again and again until nothing remained but glass and stone. No one spoke. The silence was worse than screaming. Ambassador Wei stood in his office in Geneva, watching the same images. His hands trembled slightly as he held a glass of water. He had been a diplomat for 40 years. He had spent his life believing in peace, in negotiation, in the power of words to solve problems. Now he looked at the ashes of 8 million people and felt something break inside him. His assistant entered quietly. "Ambassador, the Concord Council has requested your presence. They want to discuss the incident." Wei set down his glass. His hands had stopped trembling. The incident, he repeated. His voice was flat. They call the murder of 8 million people an incident. Sir, the council. Tell them I will be there. Wei turned to face his assistant. His eyes were different now, harder, colder. And tell them to prepare for a discussion they will never forget. The Concord Assembly Hall was the largest structure in the galaxy. Built on a station that orbited a neutral star, it could hold representatives from all 4,000 member species. Today, it was packed. News of the 4 attack had spread through the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see how the Concord would respond. Hyan opened the session with words of sympathy. "We grieve with our human friends," he said, his translated voice echoing through the hall. "This unprovoked attack is a tragedy that affects us all. The Concord condemns this action in the strongest possible terms." Wei listened to these words. He listened to the other representatives offer their condolences. He listened to proposals for diplomatic missions and peace talks and economic sanctions. He listened for 2 hours, and with each passing minute, his heart grew colder. Finally, it was his turn to speak. Wei walked to the central platform. He stood alone under the light, facing thousands of alien faces. He thought about Maria Santos, the teacher who had died in her classroom. He thought about the children who had asked about bad aliens. He thought about all the people who had trusted the Concord to keep them safe. "Thank you for your kind words," Wei began. His voice was calm, too calm. "Thank you for your sympathy. Thank you for your condemnation. Thank you for your proposals and your plans and your discussions." He paused and looked around the hall. "Now let me tell you what your kind words are worth. Nothing. Less than nothing. Your sympathy will not bring back the dead. Your condemnation will not stop your proposals are just noise, sounds that make you feel better while innocent people burn." The hall fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the Concord this way. "For 200 years, humanity followed your rules," Wei continued. "We limited our ships. We restricted our weapons. We let your observers watch our every move. We did this because you promised us protection. You promised us that the Concord's laws would keep us safe." His voice rose. "Where was that protection at 4? Where were your laws when they crossed the border? Where were your words when they rained fire on our people?" Hyan raised a hand. "Ambassador, we understand your grief, but we must respond with wisdom, not emotion. The Concord has procedures." "Procedures?" Wei's voice cracked like a whip. 8 million people are dead because of your procedures. 8 million people waited for help that never came. 8 million people trusted you, and you let them die." He stepped closer to the council's platform. "I am not here to ask for your sympathy. I am here to request authorization for a military response. Real response. Not patrols at the border. Not diplomatic missions. I am requesting permission to pursue thee and ensure they can never do this again." The hall erupted in murmurs. Representatives turned to each other, speaking in 100 different languages. The idea of military action was almost unthinkable. The Concord had not authorized offensive operations in thousands of years. And waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Ambassador, we share your desire for justice, but we must consider the consequences. A military response could lead to wider conflict. It could destabilize the entire region. The Concord's role is to maintain peace, not to start wars." "They started the war," Wei said. "They attacked our people. They broke the treaty. What more must they do before you act?" "We will act," An assured him. "We will send envoys we will demand explanations. We will seek a peaceful resolution." "Peaceful resolution," Wei laughed. It was not a happy sound. "You want to talk to the creatures who burned our children. You want to negotiate with the monsters who destroyed our world." "Ambassador, please." "No," Wei's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "I will not listen to more excuses. I came here to give you one chance to stand with us, one chance to prove that the Concord means something." He looked around the hall at the thousands of alien faces. Some looked sympathetic, some looked uncomfortable, most looked like they wanted this unpleasant scene to end. "I see your answer in your eyes," Wei said quietly. "You will talk, you will wait, you will hope the problem goes away. That is what you have always done. That is what you will always do." He straightened his back and spoke his next words clearly. "Then hear this. I am transmitting a message to every species in the Concord, every world, every station, every ship. This message comes not from me, but from all of humanity." He pressed a button on his communicator. Throughout the hall, screens flickered to life. The same message appeared in every known language. Wei read the words aloud. "For 200 years, we showed you who we wanted to be. You are about to meet who we actually are. This is your only warning." The hall fell silent and leaned forward. "Ambassador, what does this mean?" Wei smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "It means exactly what it says. We warned the galaxy about what we were. We told you about our history. We showed you our past. You looked at our wars and our weapons and our capacity for destruction, and you were afraid. That fear was wise." He began walking toward the exit. "We accepted your restrictions because we wanted peace. We hid our strength because we hoped we would never need it. We became what you wanted us to be: merchants, engineers, doctors, diplomats. Useful, harmless, tame." He reached the door and turned back. "You took that for weakness. You thought you had changed us. You thought the wolf had become a dog." His eyes swept across the assembly. "You were wrong. The wolf was just waiting, and now you have given us a reason to stop waiting." "Ambassador," and called out, "what are you planning? What will humanity do?" Wei paused. For a moment, something like sadness crossed his face. "I told you, this is your only warning. What happens next, you brought upon yourselves." He walked out. The doors closed behind him. The hall remained silent for a long, long time. On Earth, Wei met with the United Earth Council in a secure bunker beneath the old city of Beijing. The room was small and plain. No windows, no decorations, just a table and chairs and the most powerful humans alive. President sat at the head of the table. She was a small woman with hair and steel in her eyes. She had led humanity through 10 years of peace. Now she faced the possibility of war. "Report," she said simply. Admiral stood and activated a holographic display. Images of the fleet appeared. Data on their weapons and defenses scrolled across the screen. They have 27 dreadnoughts, over 200 cruisers, and countless smaller vessels. Their technology is roughly equivalent to standard Concord levels. Their soldiers are physically powerful but not particularly creative. "And our forces?" asked. Changed the display. New images appeared. Ships unlike anything the Concord had ever seen. Project Prometheus has been active for 112 years. We have 400 combat-ready vessels hidden in dead systems throughout human space. Each one is more powerful than anything they possess. We also have ground forces trained in methods the Concord believes we abandoned centuries ago." She paused. "If we release these forces, we will destroy there is no question about that. The question is what happens after." General Stone, commander of Earth's official military forces, spoke up. "The Concord will not stand by while we wage war. They may try to stop us." "Let them try," said Admiral, no relation to the ambassador, from his seat at the table. His voice was hard. "They let our people die. They have no right to judge what we do next." "This isn't about rights," President said. "It's about consequences. If we strike we reveal everything we've hidden. The Concord will know we've been building weapons in secret for over a century. They may see us as a threat." "We are a threat," said quietly. "We always have been. The only question is whether we're a threat to our enemies or a threat to everyone." Looked around the table. She saw anger in every face, grief, determination. These people had watched their citizens die while the galaxy did nothing. They wanted blood. But she also saw something else. Fear. Not of the fear of what humanity might become if they let their rage consume them. "Ambassador," she said, "what is your assessment?" Wei, who had been silent since his return from the Concord, looked up. "The galaxy sees us as pets who have lost their temper. They think we will bark and then calm down. They have no idea what we are capable of." "And what do you recommend?" Wei was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. "I spent my life believing in diplomacy. I believed that any conflict could be resolved through words. I was wrong. Some creatures only understand force. Some lessons can only be taught through blood." He looked at the holographic display showing the fleet. "I recommend we show the galaxy what happens when humanity stops being polite." The vote was unanimous. President stood and addressed the room. "Then it is decided. Project Prometheus is activated. Admiral, you have operational command. Your mission is simple. Make sure no one ever thinks about attacking a human colony again." "Saluted, understood, Madam President," and the Concord. His expression hardened. They made their choice. They chose to protect peace over protecting people. Now they can watch what happens when people protect themselves. The meeting ended. The leaders dispersed to their various commands. Within hours, signals were sent to hidden bases across human space. Ships that had waited in darkness for a century began to power up. Soldiers who had trained for wars no one believed would happen received their orders. The wolf was waking up. On the High Warlord Rand received reports of the human transmission. He watched the message and laughed. "Threats," he said to his advisors. "Empty threats from a weak species. They have no ships. They have no weapons. What can they possibly do to us?" His intelligence officer hesitated. "My lord, perhaps we should increase our defenses, just in case." "In case of what?" Rand demanded. "The humans are traders and farmers. They build hospitals, not battleships. The Concord has kept them soft for 200 years. They have forgotten how to fight." "But their history—" "Their history is ancient," Rand interrupted. "They were warriors once. Now they are sheep. The Concord made sure of that." He dismissed his advisors and returned to his plans. The attack on 4 had been a test. It had proven that the Concord was too slow to respond and the humans were too weak to resist. The next attack would be bigger, then bigger still. Soon, the entire outer reaches would belong to the... He did not know that in the darkness between stars, human ships were already moving. He did not know that for every vessel the Concord had counted, there were 10 more that had never been seen. He did not know that the sheep he had attacked were actually wolves in disguise. He would learn. Soon, the entire galaxy would learn. At the Concord assembly, Hyan reviewed the human transmission again. Something about it troubled him. The words were simple, but there was something underneath them, something dangerous. "What do we know about human history?" he asked his aides. "Their real history before the Concord." One of his aides, a young member of the species, pulled up data files. "Their world's history is violent. They fought many wars among themselves. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They came very close to self-extinction multiple times. And after they joined the Concord, they have been peaceful, model citizens. They accepted all our restrictions without complaint." And studied the data. Something still bothered him. A species that violent did not simply become peaceful overnight. A predator did not turn into prey because someone asked nicely. "Have there been any reports of unusual human activity, hidden facilities, secret projects?" The aide checked the records. "Nothing confirmed. There have been rumors over the years. Unexplained energy signatures in remote systems. Ships that seemed larger than their registered specifications, but nothing we could verify." And felt a chill run through his body. It was a sensation he had not experienced in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. Send a message to the humans, he said slowly. Tell them the Concord wishes to discuss their response to the attack. Tell them we are willing to authorize limited defensive actions. Limited defensive actions. Yes, they may protect their remaining colonies. They may patrol their own space. But they must not they must not cross into territory. They must not. He stopped. On his screen, a new report was appearing. Strange energy signatures detected near the border. Multiple contacts. The number kept rising. 50 contacts, 100, 200, 300. And stared at the screen. What are those? The aide's face went pale. They appear to be ships, human ships, but we have no records of any vessels of this type. They seem to have come from nowhere. 400 contacts, still rising. The humans only have 30 registered military vessels, the aide whispered. Where did these come from? And watched the numbers climb. He thought about the human transmission, the warning, the words that had seemed like empty threats. We showed you who we wanted to be. You are about to meet who we actually are. Now he understood. Now he saw the truth. The Concord had not tamed humanity. They had only convinced humanity to pretend to be tame. And now the pretending was over. Send the message anyway, and said quietly. Ask them to show restraint. Beg them if you have to. The aide rushed to comply, but already knew it was too late. The humans had warned the galaxy. The galaxy had not listened. And now the galaxy would pay the price for its arrogance. The galaxy did not take the warning seriously. This was, perhaps, the greatest mistake in its 50,000-year history. Hyan tried to convince the other council members that something dangerous was happening. He showed them the sensor data. He showed them the ships appearing from nowhere. He told them about the human transmission and the cold fire in Ambassador Wei's eyes. They did not listen. Humans are an emotional species, said of the Moravian Collective. They have suffered a tragedy and now they are making threats. It is understandable but meaningless. In time, they will calm down. Those ships, and began, are probably old freighters with modified signatures, interrupted of the Empire. The humans are trying to look stronger than they are. It is a common tactic among young species. We have monitored human space for 2 centuries, added of the unified worlds. They have 32 military vessels. 32. Even if they have hidden a few more, what difference could it make? They have hundreds of warships. And wanted to argue more, but he could see it was pointless. The council had decided what they wanted to believe, and no evidence would change their minds. They had kept peace in the galaxy for 50,000 years. They could not imagine a situation they could not control. He returned to his private chambers and stared at the sensor data. 400 ships. 400 ships that should not exist. 400 ships that had appeared from the darkness like ghosts. What else had humanity been hiding? Far away, the Dominion received the human warning with laughter. High Warlord Rand played the transmission for his commanders, and they mocked every word. Who we actually are, one commander repeated, his fanged mouth twisted in amusement. Who are they? Doctors, farmers. Perhaps they will heal us to death. The chamber filled with laughter. Rand smiled and raised his clawed hand for silence. The humans have made a mistake, he said. They have revealed their anger. This means they will act emotionally without planning. It will make them easy to defeat. What of the ships our scouts detected? Asked another commander. The ones near our border. Bluffs, Rand said confidently. Cargo vessels with weapons strapped on. The humans have no real military. The Concord made sure of that. He turned to the holographic display showing the galaxy. We will not wait for them to act. We will strike first. Target their nearest colonies. Destroy 3 or 4 more worlds. Show them and the galaxy that they cannot be threatened. And if the Concord objects, the Concord will do what they always do. Talk, debate, pass resolutions. By the time they decide to act, human space will be ours. Rand's eyes gleamed with hunger. Prepare the fleet. We attack in 3 days. The orders went out. Ships began moving toward the border. The greatest war machine in the outer reaches was mobilizing for what they believed would be an easy victory. They could not have been more wrong. In human space, Admiral stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus. The ship was enormous, larger than anything the Concord had ever seen a human build. It bristled with weapons that the galaxy believed impossible, and it was just one of 400. "Status report," she ordered. Captain consulted his displays. "All ships report ready, Admiral. Fleet is in position. The don't know we're here." Nodded slowly. She looked at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet's position. They were moving toward human space, confident in their superiority. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "Any word from the Concord?" she asked. Hyan sent a message requesting that we show restraint. He also asked where our ships came from, allowed himself a small smile. I don't think he expected an answer. "He won't get one, not yet," studied the display. "What about Earth? Any new orders from the Council?" "Just one, Admiral." Handed her a tablet with a message from President. Read the message. It was short, just 2 words. "No mercy." She handed the tablet back. Her face showed no emotion, but inside she felt something stirring, something old and dark and powerful, something humans had tried to bury for centuries. War had been part of humanity since the beginning. They had fought each other over land and resources and beliefs. They had invented weapons of terrible destruction. They had killed billions of their own kind in conflicts that served no purpose except pride. When they joined the Concord, humans thought they had left that part of themselves behind. They thought they had evolved beyond the need for violence. They were wrong. The violence had not disappeared. It had just been waiting for a reason to emerge. Now it had that reason, 8 million reasons to be exact. "Signal the fleet," said. "Prepare to engage." Across human space, something else was happening, something the Concord had not anticipated. In the colony cities and orbital stations, humans were changing. They stopped going to work. They gathered in public spaces and watched the news together. They talked about the dead, about what it meant to be human. Old books were being read again. Old films were being watched. Stories of human history that had been almost forgotten were being shared from parent to child. The stories of Thermopylae and Stalingrad, the stories of Normandy, and the stories of ordinary people who became warriors when their homes were threatened. His grandmother had fought in the last war on Earth 200 years ago. She had told him stories when he was a child, stories about sacrifice and courage and the terrible beauty of battle. He had thought they were just history, just tales from a time that would never return. Now he understood. Those stories were not history, they were prophecy. Ambassador Oss of the requested an emergency meeting with Hyan. They were one of the oldest species in the Concord. They had been studying life in the galaxy for over 1 million years, and unlike most other species, they had not forgotten what humans really were. Oss was old, even by standards. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with patterns of anxiety and concern as she entered N's chamber. She said without greeting, "We need to talk about the humans," and gestured for her to sit. "I have tried to warn the council. They will not listen." "Because they do not understand." Oss activated a portable display. Ancient images appeared. "These are from our archives, records we kept when humans first emerged into the galaxy." The images showed Earth, but not the peaceful blue world that N knew. This Earth was with the marks of war, cities in ruins, mushroom clouds rising over dead landscapes, armies of millions facing each other across blasted plains. "This is what they were," Oss said. "This is what they showed us when we first met them." "I know their history was violent." "You do not know," Oss interrupted. You cannot know. No species in the Concord has a history like this. Humans nearly destroyed themselves not once, not twice, but 17 times. 17 times they came to the edge of extinction through their own wars, and each time they pulled back at the last moment. She changed the images. Now they showed weapons, strange, terrible weapons that made blood run cold. This is a nuclear weapon. Humans invented it 300 years before they achieved spaceflight. A single one of these can destroy a city of millions. At their peak, humans had enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet several hundred times over. And stared at the images. Why would they build such things? Because they could, because they were afraid of each other, because destruction is easy for them, as easy as breathing. As's skin flickered with patterns of deep worry. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is that they kept these weapons for over 400 years. They lived with the knowledge that they could end their own existence at any moment, and they did not use them. That sounds like wisdom, and said. It is not wisdom. It is something far more dangerous. It is control. As leaned forward. Do you understand what I am saying? Humans are capable of the most terrible violence in the galaxy. They have proven this again and again throughout their history. But they have also proven that they can hold that violence in check. They can build weapons of apocalypse and choose not to use them. They can feel rage beyond anything we can imagine and still act with calculation. She pointed at the images from human history. This is what the Concord saw when humans emerged. This is why we were afraid. This is why we demanded restrictions. We hoped that if we kept them peaceful for long enough, they would forget how to be dangerous. And now, As's skin went dark. Now we have made them angry, and they have not forgotten anything. On the border, the first battle began. A scout squadron encountered human ships near the Velar system. The commander expected easy prey. Human vessels were small and weak, according to all the intelligence reports. He ordered his ships to attack. What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Velar incident. The human ships did not flee. They did not call for help. They simply turned toward the squadron and accelerated to attack speed. Within seconds, weapons that they had never seen before tore through their shields like they were made of paper. The battle lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 6 warships were reduced to floating debris. Not a single human vessel was damaged. The commander's last transmission was recorded and later recovered. They're too fast. We can't target them. Shields are failing. What are these weapons? What are these? Then static, then silence. When the report reached High Warlord Ran, he did not believe it. He demanded confirmation. He sent more ships to investigate. They found nothing but wreckage. This is impossible, Rand said, staring at the images. 6 warships destroyed in 4 minutes, by humans. His intelligence officer looked pale. My lord, we have analyzed the debris. The weapons used were, beyond anything we have seen, plasma-based but far more powerful than standard Concord technology, and the speed of the human vessels exceeded our best interceptors by a factor of 3. That cannot be. The Concord limits human technology. They have observers. They have inspections. The Concord only sees what the humans want them to see. The officer hesitated. My lord, I think we may have made a mistake. Rand whirled on him, fury in his eyes, but before he could speak, another report came in. Another squadron had been destroyed, and another, and another. The human fleet was not waiting to be attacked. It was hunting. In the great assembly hall of the Concord, panic was beginning to spread. Reports were coming in from across the region. Human ships were appearing everywhere, engaging forces with devastating effectiveness. Battles that should have lasted hours were over in minutes. Ships were being destroyed at a rate that seemed impossible. How is this happening? Demanded. The humans have no military capability. Clearly they do, and said quietly. He felt no satisfaction in being right. He only felt the cold weight of dread. But where did these ships come from? Where were they built? How did we miss this? Because we only saw what we wanted to see and looked around the assembly. For 200 years, we believed we had tamed humanity. We believed our restrictions had made them harmless. We were so certain of our own wisdom that we never considered the possibility that they were simply pretending. The assembly fell silent. On the display screens, more reports came in. The human fleet was moving deeper into space. Nothing was stopping them. "What do we do?" someone asked, and had no answer. For the first time in his 3 centuries of leadership, he had no idea what to do. The situation had spiraled beyond anything the Concord had ever faced. Then a new message arrived. It was from the humans. Admiral appeared on the screen. Her face was calm, her voice steady. "This message is for the Galactic Concord. You asked us to show restraint. You asked us to limit our response. We gave you 200 years of restraint. We gave you 200 years of limits. That time is over." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We told you what we were. We showed you our history. We warned you what would happen if you pushed us too far. You did not listen. You thought we had become soft. You thought we had forgotten who we are." Her expression hardened. "We remember. We have always remembered. And now you will see what humanity looks like when the leash comes off." The transmission ended. The assembly sat in stunned silence. Far away, the human fleet continued its advance. Behind them, ships burned and drifted and died. Ahead of them, an entire empire waited to learn the true cost of attacking humanity. The warning had been given. The warning had been ignored. Now came the reckoning. Admiral stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus and watched the stars burn. The holographic display before her showed the first major engagement of what the humans were calling the Reckoning War. 40 dreadnoughts had gathered near the N system to stop the human advance. These were the pride of the fleet, massive vessels bristling with weapons, each one capable of laying waste to an undefended world. They lasted 7 minutes. Human ships moved through the formation like wolves among sheep. Their weapons were not just more powerful than anything they had seen. They were different. Plasma beams that curved around shields, kinetic rounds that accelerated to relativistic speeds, electronic warfare systems that turned enemy ships' own computers against them. The commanders screamed orders into their communicators. Their ships fired everything they had at the human vessels. Most shots missed entirely, unable to track targets that moved faster than their sensors could follow. The few shots that landed barely scratched the human shields. Then it was over. 40 dreadnoughts reduced to burning wreckage. 3,000 dead in less time than it took to brew a cup of coffee. Captain approached with a damage report. "Admiral, our casualties are 0. 4 ships report minor shield damage, all combat ready." Nodded without looking away from the display. "Casualties among the enemy." "Total, ma'am. No survivors detected." Something flickered in his eyes. Sadness, regret, whatever it was, she pushed it down. "Signal the fleet. Maintain advance speed. Next target is the supply depot at station." "Aye, Admiral." As moved to relay the orders, continued to watch the debris field. 3,000 dead. 3,000 beings who would never see their homes again, never hold their families, never laugh or cry or dream. She thought about the 8 million who had died at 4. She thought about the children and the farmers and the teachers. She thought about Maria Santos, whose name she had seen in the casualty reports, a third-generation colonist who had been teaching children about the wonders of the galaxy when the sky turned to fire. 3,000 dead today. 8 million humans dead last month. The math did not balance. It would never balance. But this was not about math. This was about making sure it never happened again. The fleet moved on. Throughout the galaxy, beings of every species watched the war unfold with growing horror. The reports came in hour after hour, each one more devastating than the last. Fleets destroyed. Stations captured, worlds surrounded and blockaded. The humans did not fight like any species the galaxy had ever seen. They did not stop to negotiate. They did not pause to accept surrenders. They did not engage in the ritual posturing and threat displays that most species used before battle. They simply arrived, destroyed everything in their path, and moved on to the next target. And they were fast, so impossibly fast. The Dominion had expected to have months to prepare their defenses. Most wars in this region of the galaxy moved slowly, with long periods of maneuvering and negotiation between battles. The humans gave them no such luxury. On the first day, they lost their forward fleets. On the second day, they lost their border stations. By the fourth day, human ships were operating deep inside territory, striking supply lines and communication relays. The entire military was thrown into chaos as commanders lost contact with each other and with their capital. High Warlord Rand watched the disaster unfold from his command center on the. His scales had gone pale with stress, and his claws left deep gouges in the arm of his chair. "How is this possible?" he demanded for the 100th time. "How are they doing this?" His advisors had no answers. Everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. The peaceful traders and gentle engineers had become something else entirely, something terrifying. "They're not fighting like conquered species," said his senior tactician. "They're not even fighting like us. Their doctrine is completely different. They don't seek to defeat our forces. They seek to destroy them, utterly and completely." "What kind of species thinks like this?" "Their kind." The tactician pulled up historical data on his display. "I've been studying their past. Their wars were not like our wars. When they fought to win at any cost. They would destroy cities to save cities. They would burn their own lands to deny them to enemies. They invented weapons that could kill millions with a single strike and then built thousands of those weapons." Rand stared at the data, and the Concord thought they could make such a species peaceful. The Concord thought they could make them obedient. "There is a difference." A communications officer interrupted. "My lord, we've received a transmission from the human fleet." The display flickered and Admiral's face appeared. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, lines of stress around her mouth, but her voice was steady and cold. "High Warlord Rand, you have seen what we can do. Your fleets are destroyed, your supply lines are cut, your worlds are surrounded. This war is over. All that remains is how it ends." Rand leaned forward. "What are your terms?" "Unconditional surrender, immediate cessation of all military activity, disbandment of your fleet, war crimes trials for those responsible for the attack on 4. Paused. "And a formal apology to the families of the 8 million people your forces murdered." "And if I refuse?" His expression did not change. "Then we continue. We take your worlds one by one. We destroy your military completely. And when we reach we show you what humans do to those who harm our people." Rand felt his heart racing. He thought about the reports from his commanders, the desperate calls for help that went unanswered, the ships that vanished from his displays one by one, the growing darkness as system after system went silent. "You would commit genocide?" he asked. "You would destroy an entire species?" "We would do what is necessary." His voice held no anger, no hatred, just cold certainty. "You killed 8 million of our people. You burned our children in their schools. You showed us no mercy. Why should we show you any?" The transmission ended. Rand sat in silence, surrounded by advisors who had no advice left to give. On the 7th day, the human fleet reached the core systems. 12 major worlds, the heart of the Dominion, found themselves surrounded by ships that had crossed 1,000 light years in less than a week. The Concord assembly watched in horror. This was beyond anything they had imagined. A species they had considered controlled, managed, tamed was carving through one of the galaxy's most powerful empires like a knife through water. Hyan sent message after message to the human command. He pleaded with them to slow down, to accept negotiations, to give diplomacy a chance. Admiral responded to only one of these messages. You had 200 years to earn our trust. You had one chance to stand with us when we needed you. You chose to debate while our people died. Now you can watch while we solve the problem ourselves. The Concord's military commanders met in emergency session. Some argued that they should intervene to stop the humans. Others pointed out that they had no ships that could match the human fleet. A few suggested trying to negotiate a peace between humans and... With respect, said Ambassador Osov, who had been invited to provide historical context, you do not understand what you are dealing with. The humans are not acting out of rage. They are acting out of calculation. Every move they make is designed to achieve a specific result. And what result is that? Asked one of the commanders. They want to make sure this never happens again. They want every species in the galaxy to know what happens to those who attack humanity. They are not just fighting a war. They are sending a message. But surely they can be reasoned with. They are Concord members. They understand diplomacy. Os made a sound that might have been a laugh. They have been reasoning with you for 200 years. They accepted your restrictions. They followed your rules. They played by your system. And when they needed that system to protect them, it failed. Why would they trust it now? The commanders had no answer. On the 9th day, the first world surrendered. Then another. Then 3 more. The Dominion was falling apart as its leaders realized they could not win. High Warlord Rand made one final attempt to salvage the situation. He sent a personal message to Admiral, offering to surrender himself in exchange for the safety of his people. His response surprised the entire galaxy. Your offer is noted, but we do not want martyrs, we want justice. She outlined the terms again: unconditional surrender, war crimes trials, reparations, but also something unexpected: humanitarian aid. Human medical ships would help treat wounded soldiers. Human engineers would help rebuild damaged infrastructure. Human counselors would help civilians cope with the trauma of war. We are not here to destroy your species, said. We are here to destroy your ability to threaten us. Once that is done, we will help you rebuild, not because you deserve it, but because we are better than you. The galaxy watched this message in stunned silence. This was not how wars were supposed to end. This was not how conquerors were supposed to behave. The humans were offering mercy to the people who had murdered millions of their own. Rand accepted the terms on the 11th day. On the 19th day since the human fleet had first emerged from the darkness, Admiral stood on the steps of the Imperial Palace. Behind her, human soldiers held positions throughout the capital city. They were calm and professional. Not a single shot had been fired since the surrender. Rand approached, flanked by the few surviving members of his council. He had never felt so small. This human woman was half his size, but she seemed to fill the entire square with her presence. High Warlord said, "You are surrendering your forces unconditionally." "I am." "You accept responsibility for the attack on 4. Rand hesitated. His pride screamed at him to resist, to fight, to die with dignity. But he had seen what the humans could do. He had watched his entire empire crumble in less than 3 weeks. There was no dignity in fighting an enemy you could not possibly defeat. "I accept responsibility." Studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. "Your war crimes trial will be fair. Your people will not be harmed if they cooperate. We are not here to destroy the. We are here to ensure that no ever threatens humanity again." She turned to address the watching galaxy. Cameras from 100 species broadcast her words across millions of worlds. "Let this be a lesson. Humanity did not want this war. We spent 200 years proving that we could be peaceful. We built hospitals. We saved lives. We helped those in need. We showed the galaxy who we wanted to be." Her voice hardened. But we never forgot who we actually are. We are the species that survived 17 extinction events caused by our own wars. We are the species that lived for 4 centuries with weapons capable of destroying our entire planet. We are the species that can feel rage beyond anything you can imagine and still choose restraint. She looked directly into the cameras. They chose to attack us. They chose to murder 8 million innocent people. They thought we were weak because we had chosen peace. They were wrong. We chose peace because we knew what we were capable of if we chose war. She gestured at the conquered capital around her. Now you all know, remember this. Remember what happens when you push humanity too far. We gave the galaxy a warning. The galaxy did not listen. This is what not listening costs. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings sat in silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Humanity was not what they had thought. Humanity had never been what they thought. The peaceful traders and gentle engineers were still there, but underneath something else lurked, something ancient and powerful and terrible. The wolf had shown its teeth, and the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The Concord Assembly had never been so full. Representatives from all 4,000 member species had come, many traveling for weeks to reach the neutral station. Every seat was taken. Every corridor was packed. The galaxy wanted to see what would happen next. Ambassador Wei walked through the great doors and felt thousands of eyes turned toward him. Some of those eyes held fear. Some held anger. A few held something that might have been respect. He ignored them all and walked to the central platform. Hyan rose to greet him. The ancient leader looked tired. The past few weeks had aged him more than the previous century. Ambassador Wei, and said formally, "The Concord recognizes the representative of humanity." Wei nodded. He carried no weapons. He wore no armor. He was just a man in a simple suit, standing alone in the center of the galaxy's most powerful assembly. But everyone in the room knew what stood behind him. 400 ships, millions of soldiers, technology that could crush any force the Concord could gather. Wei began, his voice calm and clear. "We need to talk about the future." A murmur ran through the assembly. What would humanity demand? What would they take? Would they seek revenge against the Concord for failing to protect 4? Would they try to conquer the galaxy now that everyone knew their true power? "For the past 19 days, humanity has been at war," Wei continued. "We did not start that war. We did not want it. But when our people were murdered, when 8 million innocent lives were taken, we had no choice but to respond." He paused, letting the words settle. "The Dominion has surrendered unconditionally. Their military has been disbanded. Their leaders will face trials for their crimes. The threat they pose to humanity and to the galaxy has been eliminated." "And what now?" called out. "What does humanity want from us?" Wei turned to face the Moravian representative. "A fair question. What does humanity want? Let me tell you." He activated a holographic display. Images appeared showing the secret human fleet, the hidden shipyards, the weapons that had destroyed the. For 112 years, humanity has been hiding these capabilities. We built them in secret because we knew that someday, somehow, someone would threaten our people. We did not trust the Conquered to protect us, so we prepared to protect ourselves. The assembly buzzed with shocked whispers. 112 years. That meant humans had started building their hidden military less than a century after joining the Conquered. They had never truly trusted the galaxy's protection. "We could use these weapons to conquer," Wei said. "We could demand tribute from every species. We could establish an empire that would make them look like children playing at war. Some in the human government have suggested exactly this." He let that statement hang in the air. "But that is not who we want to be. Conquest is easy. Destruction is easy. Any species can learn to kill. The real challenge is building something better than what came before." Wei deactivated the display of weapons and replaced it with something else. blueprints, technical specifications, medical formulas, agricultural techniques. This is what we are offering the conquered, all of it freely, without conditions. The assembly fell silent. They had expected demands. They had expected threats. They had not expected this. These are technologies humanity developed over the past 2 centuries, Wei explained. Propulsion systems that are 3 times more efficient than anything the conquered uses. Medical treatments that can cure diseases your doctors call incurable. Agricultural methods that can turn barren worlds into gardens. He gestured at the vast display of knowledge. We could have used these technologies to give ourselves an advantage. Instead, we are giving them to everyone, because we believe the galaxy will be better if everyone prospers, not just humanity. Hyan found his voice. Ambassador, this is unexpected. What do you want in return? Several things, Wei said. First, the developmental oversight program ends today. Humanity will build what we choose. We will go where we choose. We will defend ourselves as we see fit. No more restrictions. No more observers. No more pretending we are something we are not. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. A humanity without restrictions was a terrifying thought. Second, Wei continued, we want a seat on the High Council, not as guests, not as junior members, as equals. Our voice will be heard on every major decision. And nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. Third, and this is the most important, we want an alliance. A real alliance, not the Conquered's current system of mutual promises and slow responses. We want a military partnership that can respond to threats quickly and effectively. Understood, you want us to give you control of our militaries. No, Wei said firmly. We want to work together. Human ships will help patrol conquered borders. Human soldiers will help defend conquered worlds. In return, other species will contribute what they can to our common defense. He looked around the assembly. The galaxy is dangerous, though we're not the worst thing out there. There are threats beyond the outer reaches that the conquered has been ignoring because you were too afraid to face them. Humanity is not afraid. We will face those threats, but we would rather face them with allies at our side than alone. And stepped forward. Ambassador, I must ask, after everything that has happened, why would humanity want to be our ally? We failed you. We let your people die while we debated and delayed. Why offer us partnership instead of punishment? Wei was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Because vengeance is not justice. Because destroying the guilty does not bring back the innocent. Because we spent 200 years showing the galaxy who we wanted to be, and despite everything that has happened, that is still who we want to be. He looked at In with something that might have been compassion. You kept us on a leash because you feared what we might become. That was your mistake. You should have looked at what might threaten us all and been grateful that we would be there to face it. He turned back to the assembly. We could be your conquerors. We could be your masters. We have proven we have the power. But power without purpose is just destruction. We would rather be your partners. We would rather build something worth protecting. Wei spread his hands. This is our offer. Alliance instead of empire. Partnership instead of domination. A future where humanity and the conquered stand together against whatever darkness waits in the spaces between stars. He paused. You have seen what we do to those who harm our people. Now imagine what we do for those we call friends. The assembly erupted in debate. Species that had feared humans now considered whether to embrace them. Species that had dismissed humans now reconsidered everything they thought they knew. The galaxy was changing, and everyone could feel it. The vote, when it came, was nearly unanimous. The conquered accepted humanity's offer. 10 years passed. The galaxy was different now. Human ships patrolled alongside conquered vessels, their presence a reminder that the old ways had changed. Human engineers worked on 100 worlds, solving problems that had stumped other species for. Human soldiers stood guard at the borders, watching the darkness beyond. The Dominion was gone. In its place was a new government, one that had chosen to join the conquered rather than oppose it. The war crimes trials had been completed. Those responsible for 4 had been judged. Justice had been served. On Earth, in a memorial garden built on the site where 4's coordinates were displayed among the stars, Admiral tended flowers. She was very old now, past the age when most humans retired. But she found peace in this simple work, caring for plants brought from dozens of worlds. She heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to see a young in diplomatic robes walking toward her. His scales were lighter than most of his kind, and his eyes held a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Admiral," he asked quietly. "Just now," she said. "I retired 5 years ago." "I know, he paused, gathering his courage. "I wanted to meet you. I am As. My father was a soldier in the Dominion fleet." "Studied him, was." "He died in the war. His ship was destroyed on the 7th day." As looked down at his feet. "I was young when it happened. I grew up hating humanity for taking my father from me. And now I have learned more. I have studied what happened. I know what my people did it for. I know why humanity responded as they did." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I still miss my father. I always will. But I understand now that he was fighting for something wrong." Was silent for a long moment. Then she gestured to a bench nearby. "Sit with me." They sat together in the garden, surrounded by flowers from Earth and Prime and a dozen other worlds. The air smelled of life and growth. "I think about the war every day," said softly. "I think about the people we killed, 3,000 in the first battle, 20,000 in the next, hundreds of thousands by the end." She looked at the young. "Your father was one of them. I gave the orders that killed him." As nodded slowly. "I know." "Does that make you angry?" "Sometimes." He considered the question. "But I also know that if my people had not attacked 4, the war would never have happened. We started it. Humanity finished it. I cannot blame you for defending your people." Nodded. "That is wise. Wiser than I was at your age." They sat in silence for a while, watching the flowers sway in the gentle breeze. "May I ask you something?" As said eventually. "Of course." "In the war, when you were winning, when you could have destroyed us completely, why did you stop? Your weapons, your soldiers, everything you had. We were helpless. Why did you offer mercy instead of extinction?" Thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times over the years. "Because restraint is not weakness," she said finally. "It is the hardest kind of strength. Destruction is easy. Any species can learn to kill. The real test is knowing when to stop and choosing to build something better from the ashes." She reached out and touched a flower with delicate petals. It was a species that had nearly gone extinct during the war. Human botanists had helped restore it. "We warned the galaxy about what we could be, but we never forgot what we wanted to be. We wanted to be builders, not destroyers, healers, not killers, friends, not conquerors." She looked at As. "Your species gave us a reason to kill. We had to choose whether we would let that reason define us or whether we would define ourselves. And you chose mercy." "We chose hope," corrected. "Mercy is what you show to the defeated. Hope is what you offer to the future. We showed mercy to the because we hoped that someday we would not be enemies anymore. And here you are, 10 years later, sitting in a garden on Earth, talking with the woman who killed your father." She smiled sadly. "I am not proud of what I did in the war. I did what was necessary, but necessary is not the same as good. Every life we took was a tragedy. Every ship we destroyed was full of people who had families and dreams and hopes of their own. I carry that weight every day." She looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear. "But I am proud of what humanity did after the war. We could have become monsters. We could have let our rage consume us. Instead, we chose to be better. Not because it was easy, because it was right. Oz followed her gaze to the stars. Somewhere up there, human and ships flew together, patrolling the borders, watching for threats. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For stopping, for giving my people a chance to be something other than what we were." He looked at her. "And for talking to me, I was not sure you would." Smiled. "I have learned that the most important conversations are often the hardest ones to have." They sat together as darkness fell and the stars came out. In the garden around them, flowers from 100 worlds bloomed together in the cool night air. Far above, a human battleship passed through the system on patrol. Its captain, a young woman named Maria Santos, named after a teacher who had died at 4, looked down at Earth and thought about the stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories about a simple farming colony where people lived in peace and watched the stars at night. 4 was gone. Nothing could bring it back, but its memory lived on, not as a wound but as a promise. A promise that humanity would protect its own. A promise that mercy and strength could exist together. A promise that the galaxy could be better than it was. The ship continued on its way, joining vessels from a dozen species in the endless patrol. Together, they watched the darkness. Together, they guarded the light. And somewhere in that vast darkness, something ancient and terrible stirred. It had watched the young species called humanity with interest. It had seen their war. It had seen their mercy. It had seen what they could do when they stopped pretending to be tame. It would wait, it was patient. But it knew, as it had always known, that eventually it would have to face these humans. And for the first time in 1 billion years, it wondered if it might lose. The galaxy had been warned. The galaxy had learned. And humanity had taken its place not as pets or threats, but as something the universe had not seen in a very long time. Partners, protectors, hope. This was who they had always wanted to be. And now, at last, the galaxy could see it too. The stars burned on as they always had, but their light seemed a little brighter now, knowing that humanity was watching over them. 8 million lives had been lost at 4. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten, but from their ashes something new had grown, something stronger, something better. A galaxy united, a humanity unchained, a future worth fighting for. And in the memorial garden on Earth, an old woman and a young alien sat together in peace, surrounded by flowers that should never have bloomed, on a world that should never have known such friendship. This was what restraint had earned. This was what mercy had built. This was what hope had made possible. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. And it was only the beginning.